right. So there have been some incredible recent changes in rental laws, or as far as taxes are concerned. I didn't even know really much of the details, but this is huge news. If you own rental properties, this is going to be important to pay attention to. But it's also going to be important for you to be very knowledgeable on the subject when it comes down to your investors. And then thirdly, every time, when we're talking to people, we always come across people who are wanting to invest. And so it's going to be a great topic. So we're excited to welcome Matt Cantorelli from AAR, and then our very own David Pruitt, who runs our property management division here at West USA. Gentlemen, welcome to the big show. Dave, how do you want to kick this thing off, man? And you guys got to get close to the mic. Yeah.
Fair enough. I'm just really disappointed that I didn't get the memo about the mustache. So
yeah, Matt's had this mustache for a while. I mean, every time he walks out of our office building, we talk about the mustache. We're like, if I could pull that off, I would.
It limits the Halloween costumes, but
well, now you can be Rooster for the next couple of years. That's still Maverick. It's still an awesome movie.
It's very distinguished.
Well, unfortunately, now for everybody, since we're all over Facebook and everything, everybody can see the mustache. All right, Matt. So let's just dive into it. Some big changes. What do we need to know, and what's the synopsis? That's my big word of the day.
Hey, look at you. It's almost as big as mine.
Yeah, about some of these changes in the tax laws.
Well, it's important to talk about the fact that this is something the Arizona Realtors and folks like Sue Fluke and Dave have been working on for the better part of a decade. The Realtors got into this fight because property managers like Dave were dealing with an extremely archaic and dysfunctional collection of this tax. The administration of this tax resulted in wrongful notifications to property owners, meaning the property managers lost business. There was just complete chaos. We tried working with the Department of Revenue on this. But as we were doing that, we really saw this impacting affordability and making sure that housing affordability in Arizona is competitive and as low as possible. And so last year we had a window. Representative Shauna Bullock introduced legislation, and we got really close. We fell short of one vote. I think I was on the phone with Dave at 11 o'clock at night one night saying, give me more information. Let me, get me some examples of invoices of what renters are paying. And we saw invoices that showed $50, $75, $100 a month that are being added on. And that's at no discretion of the property owner, of the property manager. This is the cities deciding to tax renters. And as the, agents of change in private property rights and, affordable housing, how do we sit back and be one of two states that allows us to continue to tax renters? And so,
let me guess, California is going to be the other one.
Surprisingly not. It's Hawaii. But a few things to just call out real quickly. This is strictly for long-term residential rentals. So this is not going to impact short-term rentals at all. But Dave, you gave me so many examples of where you saw this impacting rents, impacting the industry, even.
Yeah, and Dave, as you jump in, we just want to clarify for everybody. So when this goes into effect, January of 2025.
Correct.
So that's important because I got really excited. But January 2025, basically, rental agreements, lease agreements are not going to include rental tax because tenants will no longer have to pay it.
Yeah. So the standard AAR agreement actually, allows you to modify that based on a taxes change. So, I'm sure we'll have more. I know our attorney it's an ever evolving process, but our attorney's working with how we'll notify all those tenants of those changes as it comes closer. As you can imagine, several cities are already trying to rally against this and try to find another back channel because, quite frankly, they're now feeling like they're going to lose out on the money. And so, but to Matt's point, it obviously, just in a really synopsis of the market, is that over the last year, even though we've seen more inventory and more selective tenants, rent's still rising. And what I would say, a lot of political figures or a lot of people don't realize is that you can certainly try to tack on more funds to the owners, but that all flows downhill. And so when they keep trying to raise fees and raise fees and raise fees, the ownership, the landlords are going to ultimately say, okay, well, we're going to just pass this on to the tenant.
See, and that's a great point, because my initial response is, now all of a sudden I'm going to wake up one day as a landlord and have to pay some sort of privilege tax and basically pay out of my pocket what the tenant was paying. But then you're right, then it's the trickle down effect. Then now I have to raise my rents.
Yeah, I mean, everything, right? I mean, economically, everything's getting tighter. What I would tell you, what I'm seeing firsthand is in the market is that owners, we're stressing retention, because so many people are just moving. Now, this is their opportunity to maybe find a newer home or a more nicely upgraded home, and to sort of have a very minimal bump in rent to do that. And so that is what a lot of people are doing. I mean, there's so much about this besides the financial piece that excites me. Just the massive amount of errors that the Department of Revenue would do, and quite frankly, they were understaffed and not ready for the role. Just a little background on this. A decade ago, all these taxes were paid directly to cities.
Mhm.
And then, shortly after that time, these cities got together with the Department of Revenue saying like, hey, we don't have the staffing to handle this. And so they brought it all into the Department of Revenue. And it literally took 3 to 4 years just to get that to what I would consider a manageable process. It's still not even done correctly. And most people that do this at a professional level by their standards, but we've worked within their confines. And so what I would tell you is just Matt talked a little bit about it, like our owners, they get, once every probably 6 years, based on some random way that the Department of Revenue decides to modify what they're doing, we'll get a letter with their taxes saying, we're withholding this out of your personal returns to the Department of Revenue.
Even if the house is in an LLC?
Well, however the tax is filed,
Okay.
whatever the TPT license is under.
Okay.
If that's under that individual taxpayer's social, they'll get a little love note from the Department of Revenue, which everybody really calmly receives, that says, $16.95 is withheld because of this tax period. And the first thing they do, as you can imagine, is call their property manager, really calmly, I'm sure.
Yeah.
and they don't understand because it's not clear to them. This is not their day-to-day grind. And so then you have to explain, well, no, and it's all about timing of when they're filing and paying their tax returns. But a lot of these people are on it. They're trying to file right in the beginning of January. And if we haven't paid that TPT amount between January and February, because everything's paid in arrears, then they'll deduct that amount out of there. And then they'll send this letter out notifying them that they've deducted this tax out.
Mm.
And so it's really all of it, right? It induces panic. People get really skittish. It leads to a distrust between the landlord and their property manager. And so that's the stuff that keeps me up at night. What we've seen, Matt's seen it. That's some of the things that I've advocated a lot about, is that property managers altogether are just saying, I'm done. I'm done with this. I don't want the responsibility. I don't like, the laws are always changing. It's a moving goalpost all the time. And so they're basically saying, okay, Mr. Owner, like, here's my notice. I'm now going to essentially stay on as your property manager, but fire myself from doing your returns. And so now you have a large group, I would say 20 to 30% in the last 2 years, are now having to take over filing and paying their rental taxes to the Department of Revenue. And it's really a challenge. I would say, I don't have any metrics on it, but not many of them are doing it right. And so, like, in my opinion, is our job as property managers, first and foremost, is to protect the public, protect our clients. And by turning over these taxes to them, we're not doing that. We're relieving ourselves of that burden, but ultimately it's landing on the landlord, and they don't even know how to do it. And so, to Matt's point, some of those managers are ultimately losing relationships, losing business as a result of that. So for us, we're extremely excited. I can tell you the fight's not over. Matt will tell you the fight is not over. I mean, it's really just beginning. I think that's really why they pushed it out a year, honestly, was to try to give them a little bit of runway to come back and combat it or figure a workaround. It wouldn't surprise me to see them try to tack on some flat tax or some registration fee annually, similar to what they've done on the Airbnb front, just to try to gain some share of revenue back to kind of keep people at bay. And if I'm being really honest, Matt and I have talked about this, like I wouldn't even mind that. If it was a one-time fee annually, I don't want to pay any more money, but at least there's no moving goalpost on it. It's the fact that everything's ever moving, ever changing, ever going up. Like, no, they're not sending you a notice saying, hey, guess what, property manager, we're going to reduce the rate by 0.8%. It's going up. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we still have a really healthy rental market. We have 6,000 homes on the market, which is, you know, still really relatively low inventory based on the amount of people coming in. But ultimately, I think that more of this ability that we have to strip some of this red tape and these barriers from what's going on, I think it'll only help the landlord, but ultimately the tenants. Like we said, there's not going to be that trickle down effect with trying to jam more fees and more XYZ on the agreements.
I don't know. I always go when we're talking about government officials, I'm more of a pessimist. Okay. And so during all of this, I'm just, I don't see a scenario where a municipality, another big word there, that means city, right, Nick?
Thanks, Mikey.
Okay. Is, you know, I mean, they're got to find a way to make up this lost revenue. My fear is part of that solution is going to just be in city sales tax. They've got to find the money somewhere. But Matt, take us through the process right now, where we're at, what are the hurdles, and what things we need to be paying attention to, and how do we pay attention to this? Where do we go to keep ourselves updated with the nuances of this process?
Well, there's a few points that I want to hit as I address that. And so this year's legislation, SB 1131, passed with bipartisan support. We got the governor sign it. You know, a lot of people said after, you know, almost 20 years of not having a Democrat in the governor's office, there's no way you're going to pass a $200 million tax cut. And we got it done. We got it done because we're the largest trade association. But we really, to Dave's point, we were able to connect with our elected officials on both sides of the aisle. This was largely led by, you know, Senate President Warren Peterson and Speaker of the House Ben Toma, but we had other folks like Alma Hernandez, a Democrat from Tucson, or Flavio Bravo, a freshman senator, Democrat from the Phoenix area. Folks that understood that, Anna Hernandez in the Senate, that understood this is about, you know, connecting with people. And rents have gone up for a number of reasons. Is it inventory? Yes. You know, we had the eviction moratorium, and throughout the pandemic, we saw rental properties going up for sale and folks, you know, taking those out of the market because they're being sold to folks moving from out of state. And so you look at all these factors, you look at the impacts of cities, and we heard that this is going to defund the police, the fire. We're going to close libraries and parks. Mayor Gago said it was going to impact trash services, but I'm not sure what I'm paying every month if that's true. It was a moving target at all points. And you know, at the end of the day, we were just trying to make sure that we recognize we should not tax renters. Yes, there'll be attempts, and you know, we work with our local associations and fielded all kinds of questions about what if this, what if that. Well, I don't negotiate with terrorists. We'll take on those challenges as they come. But the important thing for listeners to take away is, you know, you can go to Arizona Realtors, AARonline.com. I put out a number of legislative updates. We're going to be doing some, you know, follow-up information as we get closer to this transition. It's important that our cities had the opportunity, you know, to wean themselves off, you know, renters' money. This was mostly less than 1% of their budget. Many of these cities like Phoenix, Glendale, Scottsdale, Mesa had budget surpluses that exceeded $100 million. So I think they'll be okay.
They'll be okay.
You know, we'll get them some, we'll get them a
Cheer.
pat on the back. And
So we mentioned earlier short-term rentals such as Airbnb, VRBOs. Does this have any impact in that world as an investor in an Airbnb?
not at all. We were very clear that we just really wanted to address housing affordability, and short-term rentals are not part of that conversation in this instance.
I would like it to be.
It's a different fight for today,
Yeah.
but in this political environment, it's so important to stay focused, and hard to stay focused. So we got this done. It's a huge win for Arizona. I think it's a huge win for the industry, and I think it's a great opportunity to highlight realtors, especially property managers, that it's not all about making more money. It's about helping people find housing and connecting with the public and making sure that we stay competitive.
Yeah, I don't do property management. That's why I send all our clients over to Dave's team. But I just assumed that rental tax was in every state. I mean, just because I fill out leases sometimes, and I just assume so. We're just one of two states that are still charging renters taxes. It's mind-boggling. But Dave, what are the talking points for you? You are on the phone with investors on a daily basis and would-be investors on a daily basis. What are those talking points? What conversations are you having with them right now?
Did you say with tenants or with landlords?
Landlords.
I mean, right now, in regards to this topic, or just as a whole, I guess that's kind of a loaded question.
Well, and whatever you want. It's your special day.
Yeah,
but I was
perfect.
thinking for this topic, but
Yeah, I mean, it was an exciting topic. We rolled it out. I mean, obviously, I was kind of on the front line of it with Matt. I was kind of always texting like, where do we stand? What's going on? Because as you can imagine, not only our own business, but just all the agents that we service at West USA, is that it's a constant stress point for everybody, us, landlords, even tenants. I can't tell you, it's just a lack of education of, a tenant, they go see a home, they maybe have an agent that hasn't informed them of the rental taxes. It's in the listing. They come to lease signing, and they get the surprise of a 2.3% tax. And, on a home that's the average rent now is close to 2,000, a little bit over, obviously that's $46. So now that's $46 on a budget that was not planned for. And so for those people, it's quite shocking. I would say over the last few years, depending on who's educating them, it could turn into a volatile topic where they feel like it's almost a bait and switch. And you try to go back and explain to them, no, this is the tax and this is why. And you try to have all those talk track with them. But depending on their background experience, they may be upset and may not want to continue on with the lease. So obviously that's damaging to us, the landlord and the tenant ultimately. We use a lot. We have a vendor partner that we use called Second Nature. And they have a phrase which I love. It's called a triple win. And it's a win for the landlords, a win for the tenants, and a win for the owners. And so, I'm sorry, managers, tenants, owners. And so for me, when I heard that, I loved it. I've tried to implement it in our business. Every time we try to make a decision, I'm like, how can we make this work for everybody? It doesn't always work perfectly that way. Obviously, if the rent increases, it's pretty tough to sell that as a win for the tenant. But on the flip side, it is a win if you say, hey, the rents in your neighborhood have gone up $500. We're only raising you $65,
mm-hmm.
because then they can understand they're not dumb. They can go look at Zillow or look at some of the agent websites, and they can see, all right, well, yeah, that home down the street that looks worse than mine is $400 more a month. I'm going to go ahead and sign on right now and pay the extra $100. So yeah, I mean the ability to talk through, first of all, this change in the TPT taxes is huge. But more than that, with our agents, it's bigger for me with our agents because, I'm a big entity. I have a bookkeeper that almost handles this exclusively. And so for me, this is kind of a seamless transition for us, even though we have some hurdles and we have some hiccups with the Department of Revenue. for us, this will just create more time where a lot of these agents, they didn't want the liability. They were so scared that they were going to make a mistake because of what was going on. I mean, you would have Sue Fluke's famous. Her husband was a controller, and he was so paranoid about TPT taxes that he would physically walk over like $3.5 million checks to the Department of Revenue to make sure that they got cashed and applied to the correct accounts. And so for him, that would take a lot of his day. And so we have our managers at West USA that are so paranoid about it, they literally drive down there and deposit checks there to make sure that there's no mess ups. And to be honest with you, there still is mistakes because it's a human system. It's a moving target, and we don't do it well enough to continue doing it.
All right, Matt, what are we not asking, or what am I not asking, and what else? Is there anything else we need to know?
Well, real quickly, I think it's just as we transition out of this, let's highlight this, as so often, realtors and the real estate industry is looked at as entitled, sometimes overpaid, greedy. This is a real social win in Arizona. So if you have questions, reach out to us. Again, aaronline.com, and learn more about it. Because as Dave said, sometimes during the application process, this can feel like a bait and switch. We also advocated what this means to the application when you're looking at kind of your debt to income, or how much money you're bringing in, and how that you need to make 3 times the rent. And so that $47 turns into almost $150, and it becomes a real barrier to access to housing. So,
well, I think that's where, I mean, it's an interesting point. I think that's one of the messages that we need to get out, because we are not often viewed as real estate agents and realtors in the most positive light, for good or for worse, or whether we deserve it or not. It is what it is. But the public, as this rolls out, the public knows that we need to know we did this.
yes.
I mean, we as a real estate agent community was partially responsible for this and got the ball rolling to protect you as the consumer.
We saw this through the pandemic, with the eviction moratorium, when people were struggling to make ends meet. Dave can probably tell you, but a lot of property managers turned into social workers almost.
100%.
Making sure that those people stayed in those houses, because one, it's the right thing to do, but it's also bad for business.
Yeah, I can. So I don't want to jump in on that, but I can't even tell you, how important that is to me. And I think that yes, we need to get the message out. It has to be strategic, because, there's going to be a subsection that's going to be like, look at this win for landlords, and it's not just a win for landlords. And I think that's where it's really important. The moratorium, for me, it came in a point where we were really evolving as a business. I would say forever it's been this thing of the property manager represents the landlord, and basically the tenant can kind of go down their own road. And for me, it's really important that that's not the case. Ultimately, the best outcome for our owner is keeping that tenant in that property as long as possible, as happy as possible. If we're looking at short-term dollars, yeah, it's great to raise rent X amount to be market value. But keep in mind, if you raise it, that tenant vacates, the average turnover is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 5,000 to 7,000 when you need to do flooring, paint, etc., plus your downtime. And so you're talking about that $500 in rent is eaten up entirely just by the turnover. And so if you have the wrong person sending that message, it's going to come across, and they're going to miss everything that really matters. So I would, to your point, I would strive to really continue to improve the tenant relationships, because ultimately that's going to be the long-term benefit of the landlord and yourself, the manager.
All right, gentlemen, and I use the term loosely. Appreciate your time. And again, if you're wanting to learn more and stay updated, just go to aaronline.com, and you'll find everything that you need. I appreciate you guys stopping in.
Can I do one shameless plug for this? Is that on October 20th, we are hosting a property management state of the property management division, essentially. And that's going to be held at Arizona Christian University at 59th and Greenway. It's free. It's open to all West USA agents. We're not having any outside people. We're going to have some really good vendors that are going to actually talk about this topic. and how to continue to make a better relationship between your tenant and your owner. And ultimately, at the end of the day, create that triple win of improving the tenant situation, the owner situation, and then you, the property manager situation. So,
all right, appreciate it. Yeah, we will definitely as soon as we get we'll get that, start rolling that out in our
great.
announcements. Yeah. All right, appreciate it. And Nick, good job. We got through this first podcast with the new software.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks, everybody. Vernacular.
All right. Appreciate everybody joining us. And we leave you with the quote of the day. Your great strength is knowing who you are. Appreciate everybody joining us. Go out and sell a home.